people have heard of the idea that moss grows on the north side of trees. And I very quickly, as everybody does, if they go and look for that, realise that it's sometimes true and sometimes not.
Yeah.
So I thought the rebel in me was kind of like, so you're sort of giving me a rule there, and I'm finding it's quite easy that nature just breaks it all the time. So I was like, well, why does that sometimes work, sometimes not? You know, instead of looking at a screen or even a compass, just see if the tree will show you which way you need to go. But the subject really explodes when you go, everything is part of a map. And my whole philosophy now is based on this idea that nothing is random.
So do you feel like your exploration in natural navigation has armed you with a wider philosophy for life, of navigating life?
This is a rich subject, you know. Yeah, it is deep and
bring your wellies.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're gonna be hacking through some interesting stuff.
Hello and welcome to the Fandabi podcast, where we take a closer look at my favourite topics covered on my main YouTube channel, Fandabi, and explore how the wisdom of the wilderness and history can help us find balance and perspective in our modern lives. You can catch the video version of these conversations on my second YouTube channel, Fandabi Deep Dive, and the audio version on all the usual podcast platforms. This podcast is ad-free and completely funded by my supporters on Patreon. So if you like what you hear, then check out the show notes for links to support. Plus, there's a link to my online community-led survival school, Resilient Roots. Thank you for your attention. Now let's get into it. So my guest today is Tristan Gooley, otherwise known as the Natural Navigator. Tristan is a best-selling author and world-renowned expert in natural navigation and reading nature's clues and signs. Some of his best-known books include The Natural Navigator, as well as The Walker's Guide to Outdoor Clues and Signs, which is how I first discovered his work. He also has a new book coming out called The Hidden Seasons. Now, I was honoured to have Tristan come up to visit me in the Scottish Highlands to help me film a video on how the 17th century Highlanders might have navigated their way across the wildlands of Scotland. And that video will be released over on my main YouTube channel, Fandabi. But before we started filming that, we thought, hey, why don't we just have a seat at base camp in the woods and record a conversation and see where it takes us. And a very enjoyable conversation it was too. Tristan shared a bit about his journey, forging a career teaching and writing books about natural navigation. And we also discuss how these natural navigation techniques go way beyond just the practicalities of finding your way from A to B, but how they can be used to deeply enrich our experience of the outdoors and really enrich our experience of reality in general. We also talk about how they can be used for mindfulness to help ground our attention back into the present moment. And later on in the conversation, we both just share our experience in the creative process in general. For him, it's writing books, and for me, it's making videos. So it was a great conversation. Tristan is a really lovely guy, very humble, very interested. You'll notice that he knocks the attention of the conversation back towards me a couple of times, which I wasn't prepared for, so my answers weren't very good. But without further ado, I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Okay, Tristan, welcome to the woods. Thank you so much for doing the journey from the southern lands up to here. We're now sitting in the woodland base camp next to the stream, so if you can hear that, hopefully that's a relaxing background noise. But thank you so much for coming up to join me.
Oh, thanks for having me, Tom. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So it's funny. So I first got this book, The Walker's Guide, Outdoor Clues and Signs. I think I was given it as a Christmas present probably 4 years ago, before I met my now fiance, Kiva. And it's funny, when we first started dating, she'd also been given it. I don't know if for a birthday present, Christmas present. So 2 copies ended up in our house. And Kiva is furious at me that both of them have managed to get coffee stains, like ring marks on it. So I don't know whose is whose because they've both been marked by my bad habit of putting cups of coffee in books. But yeah, no, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you came up. Your books are, they've sparked my interest in multiple levels, not only as, you could say, the sort like practical tools, you know, especially from my perspective of delving into history and trying to figure out how our ancestors travelled and used the landscape, but also what seems to be a common interest in our conversation in the car is just this generally exploring awareness and how we experience the world. And methods of kind of detaching from the societal kind of left hemisphere busyness of the completely distracted world, and kind of tuning into this kind of indigenous, you could say, this kind of indigenous awareness in the environment. So there's loads of things I want to talk about, but maybe it's best just to start with a bit about you, where you're from and what got you started in delving into natural navigation.
I'm not from one spot, but I'm definitely from southern England. I have originally, going back far enough, I have some Irish blood, some Kiwi blood, but I'm an Englishman mainly, southern England. Moved around a lot as a kid. I don't think of one place in the first 10 years of my life and go, that was home. I couldn't put a pin in the map for that. For reasons I don't fully understand and probably never will, I was quite restless and quite rebellious, and I didn't like systems. I didn't like the second somebody told me, you are going to this school or you are going to this room and these are the rules and this is the way you do it, there'd be some part of my brain that would just go like, maybe. Yeah. And what I know now, fast forwarding many years, is that sort of rebelliousness is it can be a positive or a negative energy, and if you can find your thing, i.e. a channel for that sort of energy, it can be hugely positive. But if you don't, it's sort of it's steam building up in a vessel with no release in it, and it ends up being not positive. So my sort of basic story is I really enjoyed putting together journeys from a very young age. So if somebody said to me, would you like me to lead you up this big mountain, or would you like to find your own way up that small hill, it wouldn't take me 1 second to answer that. Small hill every time. And I didn't really understand at the beginning, but I fell in love with the art of navigation. And between the ages of, it's hard to know exactly when it started, but there was definitely a seed there by the age of 10, probably younger. And my mid-20s, I was building conventional navigation skills, map, compass, all the way up to, I sort of wanted to get to the point where I felt I could, walk or hike or sail or fly, if I thought I'm here and I want to get there, I wanted those skills. And I loved the idea of shaping a journey. And then what happened was I found over my 20s, I probably got the first sense in my early 20s, and by my late 20s, I'd already changed my philosophy that conventional navigation is fantastic and it's necessary and important skills, but the tools are so amazing that we lose some of our ancient awareness. So I started turning things on their head, not overnight. I probably, as mid-20s, I probably dabbled with the very first very, very small journeys, maybe 1 mile, thinking, well, I just won't look at any of the map, compass, pre-using GPS. And suddenly there was this explosion where I suddenly went, wow, I'm getting that sense of excitement I had when I was clambering into a small boat as a 10-year-old, but I'm 25 or 26. And I was taking on big expeditions, but enjoying small natural navigation journeys more. I found them more philosophically rewarding. I was noticing things. The kit is so amazing. If you do a big expedition now and you want to do it the safest way, you're going to allow the tools to look at the landscape rather than you. So you're going to be looking at screens and dials and all sorts of things like that, depending what you're doing. So that's been my awful lot of fun ups and downs along the way. But that was the basic. That's the path I followed. Although there was no plan, so I can look back and it sort of makes some sense, and it's quite fun from this perspective. But it was a bit of a ride. I didn't know where I was going. For most
but you're
of it.
following the enthusiasm. You're following the spark.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I loved learning. So that was the weird thing, is that school systems and discipline of all sorts, I would find myself rebelling against. But the process of learning, I loved. So, and I think all of us have had some experience of that in learning environments where, you know, if you're a 13-year-old and somebody says you've got to learn this, and the best reason they can give you is an exam, it's sometimes good enough, sometimes not good enough to get you into
It'll
it.
be good for your CV.
Exactly.
You're going to
that
get
sort
a
of thing.
job when you're older at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if somebody come up to me aged sort of 12 and said, right, you've got an exam in navigation in 2 years, you're going to have to learn all of this stuff, I would have gone, okay, I'll jump through the hoops, you know, I'll perform, I'll do what I'm told up to a point. But whenever any of us find that thing where we're the ones putting ourselves through the hoops rather than somebody else telling us to do it, it's so exciting. So I suddenly thought, well, I'd love to be able to sail a boat from here to that island. What do I need to know that I don't know now? And it just so happens that there are exams and there are practical tests and that sort of thing. But I loved it, you know, and I think, you know, those are, sounds a bit blunt to put it like this, but I think, and happiness isn't the right word, but sort of contentment and satisfaction are definitely related. And most of the adults I know, if they've managed to turn that process around, so they're not being told the hoops they have to jump through the whole time, they're thinking, well, that's where I kind of want to get, which is the navigation metaphor. And then they could put themselves through those hoops. It's a positive experience, and even if you're putting in crazy hours, which I was at times, it's all good stuff. Yeah, so an hour doing something that feels pointless is a long time, but a year working towards something you're really excited about just goes by in a
And there's all these times where it's maybe when you're doing it, or maybe there's one goal that you aim for, and maybe in that short term it feels like a failure, but then in 3 years' time or something, you look back and it's like, no, that was actually an important probe into something to realize that there's not something there for you to navigate down another thing. So yeah, man, there's already a few things I want to delve into. I mean, first of all, I think it's great that there's so many people that don't fit into the modern schooling system and education system, and it's almost like it just grinds them down. And actually there's so based off the Prussian model, and apparently it was actually kind of almost designed for that, but maybe that's another rabbit hole not to go down. But yeah, I'm kind of the same. I felt like I was not wired for modern school system, and it's lucky that I found a joy for learning that's led me down my path. So it's so cool to see.
When was the moment you knew that you'd be sitting here and doing this?
I'm doing this. Well, it's funny. I mean, the podcast is about you, but I can tell it's my bit of the story is that I was really inspired by Ray Mears.
Okay.
And I spent all my childhood playing in just a small patch of forest in a golf course in a den, and I just spent all my time pretending to be a hunter-gatherer, just playing tribesman. And he had an episode where he went to see the Hadza in Tanzania and showed how they lived and how they're hunting with bows and arrows and stuff. And I just, I was like 10 years old going to school. I was like, I just want to do that. Like, why do I need to go to school and do this stuff and get a job and sit in a classroom when there's guys that are running around with bows and arrows and look like they're having a great time?
Yes.
So that was like my earliest memory of like, I want to do what allows me to live as close a life to that, essentially.
Yeah.
Which is, twists and turns, and it led me to go to ecology, because ecology was like the academic Western form of maybe studying it. But now it's like, luckily enough, I do get to spend most of my time in the woods now, dressed up as a Highlander, running around, often with a bow and arrow. So
yeah, no, I love what you do. It's because your enjoyment and your passion is genuine, and that comes across. And you're fun to watch. You've there's part of people. It comes back to the learning thing. We've all had good teachers and bad teachers, and part of the process is entertainment. And
play.
You're entertaining. I enjoy your videos a lot.
Thanks. I'm glad you, not put off by this strange humour sometimes.
Love it.
Yeah, so you said, so navigation. Obviously, it's practical. It's delving into history, but then also it's a metaphor for life. And I kind of feel like maybe you're kind of touching upon it there when you're saying you're looking at maybe some of your peers and other people in your life who are chasing the hoops that other people are telling them to jump through. So do you feel like your exploration in natural navigation has armed you with a wider philosophy for life, of navigating life?
Yes, but not in a... there were a lot of stepping stones, and that wasn't the goal I was heading towards. So for me, what happened was, I thought, okay, well, our ancestors 10,000 years ago had colonized most of the big lumps of planet Earth. You know, not a lot of people at the poles, obviously, but by and large, if it was habitable, there was sign of human life there, or not far away 10,000 years ago. And people debate exactly when the compass started appearing in Europe and China, but we can be pretty sure it was thousands of years after all these journeys had taken place. So we know, even if we don't have all the hard evidence, we know human beings were very good at finding their way, and we see it in the animal kingdom as well. So I knew these techniques worked, and it sits at the very edge of bushcraft and things like that. But what's interesting is it only really survived as a subject in a survival emergency type context. There really wasn't a lot out there that I could find where people were doing it purely for its own sake. So over the years, I've had a lot of fun rubbing shoulders with survivalists, bushcrafters, you know, the military, ecologists. The wonderful thing about natural navigation is if you have an interest in anything, there's probably an ology that isn't a million miles from it. And natural navigation at times relies on that. You need to occasionally, you rely on astronomy, geology, botany. I could go on with literally 100. But the stepping stones really was I came across the few techniques that had survived. So people have heard of the idea that moss grows on the north side of trees. And I very quickly, as everybody does if they go and look for that, realise that it's sometimes true and sometimes not. So I thought, the rebel in me was kind of like, so you're sort of giving me a rule there, and I'm finding it's quite easy that nature just breaks it all the time. So I was like, well, why does that sometimes work and sometimes not? North Star. So I'd say moss on the north side of trees and the North Star were two of the only techniques that survived in popular imagination. Put a sort of, you know, silly way. If you stopped 100 people on a city street and said, name one way that our ancestors found their way, you know, most of them would probably look at you weirdly and go blank. But if they said something, it would be the North Star or moss.
Or the sun.
Or the sun, possibly.
Yeah,
but
stars. They might not even tell you what stars, but stars in general.
Yeah. And so I then thought, okay, well, this is a fun hobby and it seems to work. I can find my way across a bit of woodland or find the coastline I'm looking for. But there might only be half a dozen techniques. So it's going to be quite a small hobby. It's not. And then I realised it wasn't half a dozen, it was a dozen. And then I kept looking, and the tipping point for me was I've researched, practiced and written about hundreds of techniques for finding direction, but sometimes finding direction is the easiest part. So if the sun is out, you're probably not going to try and find direction using a butterfly, but you can find direction using a butterfly, you know, with a bit of practice and a little bit of luck in the case of a butterfly. But that's direction, and for me the really exciting tipping point came when I realised, the richness, the art of the subject is not. It is in direction finding, but it explodes in kind of potential when we think about map making. And I'd say that's been the most exciting thing for me over the last 15 years, is the idea that not are the 20 techniques that we need, that we put in our kind of mental tool bag, and if things go wrong, we pull them out. Part of my passion is saying to people, this is stuff you use when it's going well. You know, instead of looking at a screen or even a compass, just see if the tree will show you which way you need to go. But the subject really explodes when you go, everything is part of a map. And my whole philosophy now is based on this idea that nothing is random. You know, the plants we see, the animals we see and hear are related to the water we can hear, are related to the trees. And every single thing I think is trying to tell us something. And at that point, it's a question of how rich a picture you want. So I sometimes use the analogy of a jigsaw. Sometimes you want a really fast puzzle that you can do in a minute. Sometimes you want to go really, really deep and get a sort of granular understanding of what's going on around you. And natural navigation's like that. Every insect, every cloud is trying to tell us something. And if we understand that basic philosophy, suddenly things stop being just visual noise. It's not just a load of kind of green, brown, blue and white in the sky. It's all part of the map. And that for me was the moment where I went, yeah, this is going to take about 200 lifetimes to,
Yeah.
but I'll do what I can in one.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel in a way it's similarities in my journey there. Like at the same time I was getting interested in Ray Mears, I got the SAS Survival Handbook, John Lofty Wiseman. And that's all about things to do when it's an emergency. It's all about the emergency. And in the survival world, it's all kind of preparing for that imaginary situation where you'd be like, yes, I can actually do a friction fire now. Yes. But actually I prefer, I use that word survival because it's the most generally recognized term, right? It's, I like what you said about skills for when things are going well. And for me, I became, slowly obsessed with it. It started with the survival, this kind of idea. Okay, I wanted to be a hunter-gatherer. How can I do that in Western civilization? Ecology, root, learning about plants and stuff. And I almost think you're talking about a jigsaw puzzle. I almost feel like it's like layers of knowledge. And it's like, so say if you get someone who really doesn't know anything about nature, and they'll just be like, they'll walk into this woods and they'll just go, nature. This is just nature. But then you say, that's a birch tree. And they're like, okay, nature and a birch tree. And it's kind of adding those things. Yes. And then it's like, the more plants you learn. And then it's like, okay, the medicinal and edible uses of these plants, there's another layer. And then like the mythological beliefs that people had about these plants 300 years ago, there's another layer. And it's like, the more layers you extrapolate on, it's just the more fascinating it becomes. And it's and many lifetimes work, so that's a great way of putting it, rather than because I feel in the survival world people are trying to justify, it's like, well, but this is still practical because when things go wrong you could use this.
Yes, yeah.
But it's like, it's quite nice to be like, well, why don't we just do it for the art of it?
Absolutely.
Have to be for that reason.
I think that's a really good point, and I do get asked occasionally, is this necessary? And my answer is, do you need all of these skills to get through the average modern lifestyle day alive? No. Do you need this knowledge to have the richest possible experience on a journey from A to B? Yes. And going back to because I now feel, whilst I'm sort of energized and still motivated massively by the richness and the potential of the subject, I worry slightly that any art form that seems infinitely rich or complex is off-putting. So I try and bring people into the subject, if they haven't come across it before, with a very, very simple, practical way in, which is, which way am I looking? If you just stand in any environment, it doesn't have to be, we're in a lovely patch of wilderness here, but you could be standing on a train platform, and you're about to kind of check something, out of habit on your smartphone or something, but you could just, for 5 seconds before that, you just go, which way am I looking? North, south, east, west. And you suddenly find yourself, I can't quite see the sun, but I can see the sun's reflecting off the edge of that cloud, which means it must be there, and it's mid-morning, so the sun's going to be close to southeast. So if that's kind of southeast, then maybe I'm looking south. And then you suddenly notice that the two sides of the train tracks look differently. So it's at one end, I think there's infinite richness, and the skills are they are infinite. But for me, it's about taking our brain with us. So instead of saying to our brain, let's become brilliant at this thing, we give our brain a nice fun puzzle to solve. And I feel very passionately now, it's something that I've seen in myself and in other people, that if you say to somebody, go and connect with nature or whatever stuff, there's a lot of good, positive sentiment, which doesn't, I think, always have the desired aim.
Yeah.
So we hear a lot, in the media, people saying, oh, we should immerse ourselves in nature, we should reconnect with nature,
Yeah.
we should...
What does that mean?
Absolutely.
How do you do that?
And it can, I think, be counterproductive, because people might go, okay, well, I'm living or working in a city, but okay, I've kind of heard that message enough times. I will go and have my lunch in the park rather than sit at a desk or something. But they then sit there and go, well, nothing's happening. And it's because the brain is kind of like, well...
The monkey brain's trying to find something to chew on.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So we throw it something to work with and just sort of say, can I find north by looking at these wildflowers? Okay, most flowers face south, so, that's a good start. And then the brain sort of goes, finally you've remembered what I'm for. It's not staring at screens and all that stuff. And it rewards us with a lift in energy and mood and engagement and all of these things, and then you just nudge it with a different question. You say, can I tell what the weather's going to do by looking at these leaves? Yeah.
Well, you're also creating enrichment for yourself. In Animals in Captivity, they're all talking about enrichment. It's funny, so we talked a wee bit on the drive here about meditation, mindfulness, things like that. And that sort of you reminded me there when you were just talking about, giving something your brain to chew on. And maybe it's so I've talked about it in my videos about attention, and actually when you kind of scroll down the hierarchies of like your survival priorities, everyone talks about, okay, we need to breathe, we need to stay warm, hydrated, and all that stuff. But before that is attention. Because if you're not paying attention, you do something stupid, and
yes.
you're dead.
Yeah.
And attention these days is obviously a big topic. With it's just everything is harvesting our attention. And we're all playing a part in that economy of attention. And now with smartphone and TikTok and short-term gratification, and it's just bombardment. And maybe it's like, your little techniques that you're saying there, it's almost reminds me, maybe it's still your little rebellious self in there, where it's actually like when a little advert or something tries to get your attention, you're like, actually, I'm not going to go on, and I'm not going to chew on that because you want me to chew on that. So instead, I'm going to, tune on something that detaches from those things that are trying to suck you away, and brings you back to the reality that you're actually in. So it is actually, I don't know if that's intended, but I don't know, it's a mindfulness practice. It
is definitely, and I think that's one of the exciting, unplanned bonuses for me and people who've enjoyed natural navigation, is that it's not, I get approached by people, TV companies and stuff like that, and I sort of say to them, really happy for us to work together, but you have to understand this is a rich subject. Deep. It is deep, and
bring your wellies.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're gonna be hacking through some interesting stuff, because if you're looking at pure pragmatism and pure how do I get from point A to point B as fast as I possibly can using nature, you have a little bit of luck. So a good example is the desert. It's a harsh environment, obviously, so people sort of assume that these sorts of skills are harder, but actually natural navigation, unless you're in a sandstorm in the desert, is pretty easy. Mm-hmm. Being super accurate takes a bit of practice, but sun and stars, moon and planets, it's with using the sand dunes as well, it's pretty straightforward sort of stuff. So it's more about getting to that, you're sort of saying attention there, so it's some of the most rewarding experiences I've had is when I go into some woods that I know fairly well, and I just make a conscious effort to go to a bit that I don't think I've set foot in, and just think to myself, well, I know there's a stream south of here. I'm going to spend whatever it might be 3 hours covering half a mile to get to that stream, but my challenge is I'm going to find one clue that I haven't used in this environment before. So it's in that context, it's not, the sun comes out, okay, there's south, off we go.
Yeah.
It's, well, yes, there are literally 100 different ways of establishing direction within a stone's throw where I stand.
Mm-hmm.
By the time you've practiced this art a little bit, you're familiar with most of the obvious ones. So you're then sort of going, you're then seeing something that's a bit anomalous, like you see a troop of fungi and you go, oh, I don't recognise that fungus. I wonder why is it only on that side of the tree? Is it related to the roots? Because the fungi aren't depending on sunlight, so there's not an automatic direction connection there. There's a relationship with wind for spores, and there's a relationship with moisture for the fruiting, and there's a relationship with temperature. So the brain's going like this, and then you suddenly go, they're not telling me direction. They're telling me the trees I'm likely to find, and those trees are only found near water, so I'm nearly there.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I wonder. I'm quite interested in your learning journey and how it kind of relates with your books, because you've written, although it's still kind of maybe under this general bracket, natural navigation, you've also written books about how to read water and quite a few topics. So maybe can you run through, take us through a bit of your learning journey and from the order of books that you've been writing.
Thanks. Yeah, so I set up my natural navigation school, which is a grand way of putting it.
So you did the school before any books?
Yes, yeah. Okay. So 2008 was the first time I advertised a course publicly. I'd been teaching friends, and it was one of the things that gave me the courage to have a go at making it the full-time job, was that, if we're all, if we're lucky enough to have good friends, they tell us to shut up a lot, and that's how we kind of learn when our interest is not shared by the world.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, don't you? You kind of like go, oh, this is it, and then they go, oh, just shut up, mate. And you're like, okay, well, I find it interesting, I understand you don't.
Yeah.
And I was lying on a beach in Turkey, and I'd been navigating a boat without using any technology with a friend, and we were lying on the beach, and he's a very good friend, and he's quite good at telling me to shut up, and he just sort of goes, just run me through how you're doing that thing with the stars, and 2 hours later I was still kind of talking,
and you're still listening.
Yeah, and I thought, well, maybe I'm not the only person in the world who finds this kind of stuff interesting, and so I set up the courses. And then a publisher approached me and said, would you like to write a book? And I was very excited because I felt...
You had a story about a business card and a hairdresser.
Yes!
I remember.
Yeah. I haven't told that story in a little while. But yes, So
the publisher got their hair cut and found this.
Yes, that's right.
That's
Yeah. And that came about because my father worked very, very hard in an industry where it's easy to go bust and had some success, but he was always drilling into me that it's the small things. So he was probably imagining I'd sort of go into business at some sort of point, and I guess we all do in some way.
Yeah.
But he was sort of saying people get excited about things like TV advertising back in the day, or perhaps social media now. But he was sort of saying, he left a sort of a very basic printed sort of leaflet / brochure on a tube train once, and the phone went 5 hours later, and the person was inquiring at his travel agency, and he said, just out of interest, how did you hear about us? Because we'd only been trading for weeks or months or whatever it was. And the person said, well, I just picked up one of your things on the train, and it was either my father or his friend who set the business up with. Was that between this station and that station? And the phone just went silent because I digress. But yes,
yeah.
So with that, this was back in the day.
So a publisher approached you,
and they said, do you want to write a book? And I said, yes, but I'm really enjoying the courses. They're taking up a huge amount of time, but I'm really enjoying that process.
Did you have another job at the time, or you'd just gone full?
I'd gone full time into
jumped
this.
Into it.
But I didn't, I had a bit of savings from a previous job, and I didn't, if I'm honest, I didn't expect it to work as a full-time career. But I said to myself, don't think about that. You've got 6 months here. The worst that happens is a sabbatical. Your mates laugh at you, but they've been doing that all your life. So just roll with it and go with it. And so I got approached by this publisher, and I've always felt like I wanted to be a writer. At school, funny enough, when I was meant to be doing other stuff, I was trying to write novels and stuff. And so when I got invited to, I did say to the publisher initially, I said, look, I'd like to actually just run courses, because it's exhausting and it's great, and I just need to focus on that. I don't want to have too many balls in the air. And they said, that's a really cool way of looking at this, but can I just throw this idea at you? Some people who were on your course last week could go out there and put all that knowledge into a book and put a few other things around it. How would you feel if you walked into a bookshop a year from now and saw what you just taught them on the bookshelf?
Yeah, that's true.
And I went, okay, fair enough, let's do it. So very, very busy year or two, and the Natural Navigator came out in...
So is that one?
Yes.
That was your first book?
Yeah.
On the camera.
Cool. And in that, really, it's a collection of everything that I felt humanity had gathered and not lost in terms of techniques, but it's also about the history, the culture, a little bit about the philosophy. So I do, right from the beginning, I do kind of say this is not a subject that belongs in a museum. This is a living art. Yeah. And then the book, did quite well. It did quite well in the UK, then in North America, and then it kind of spread around the world a bit. And it allowed me to go, wow, this is a job. This is not a sabbatical where I have to kind of, sort of sheepishly say that was a really fun, interesting 6 months. I need to get a proper job now. I had a bit of room there to kind of think, right, what are we going to do? So the thing I also learned through the book is that I love teaching because as you'll know, you see it in people's eyes. You can see what interests them, and you can see what type of communication gets which idea across.
Yeah.
But the thing I love about books is every single book, the word author is of course related to authority. So you will not get commissioned by a decent publisher to write a book unless you are, in my head, 3/4 of the way there.
Interesting. Okay.
But the fun thing is you push yourself. I suppose an analogy might be a sports event. If there's a really tough big race of some sort in 6 months' time, you feel you're 3/4 of the way there, but the next 6 months or a year, whatever it is, you're building towards it, and that's what I love about a book. Is I push myself really hard in terms of the research, in terms of getting out there, meeting people, dry research. What I love is some of it's academic articles that came out a month ago. Some of it is unearthing what the ancient Greeks were saying, 3,000 years ago or something weird. And
So you're pushing yourself a little bit outside your comfort zone. I suppose that's what makes it exciting. If it's something that you could, write in an hour, it's not very exciting. But if it's something that's a little bit beyond what you actually know, and there's a bit of a deadline, and there's people looking at you, then you're just like, better get all this together. Yeah, it's that. Yeah,
and I really love that. So what I've done is there's a much longer answer, but the brief answer is it took a couple of missteps, as these things always do, but what I discovered was that there's a core philosophy which underpins natural navigation, but is actually broader than natural navigation. But it's my interpretation of the broad school of natural navigation, which is deduction. And so I sometimes think of it as a hub and spoke model. So we've got a wheel, and at the centre, at the hub, is this core idea where stuff isn't random. The stars appear the way they do for a reason. The animal behaves the way it does for a reason. The water looks the way it does for a reason. The cloud is the shape it is and the colour it is for a reason. If we pause and go, what is that reason? It will give us all sorts of things back. It might give us a compass, it might give us a map, it might help us predict what the animal will do next. But all of those things are part of the same school, which I think of as natural navigation, which is understanding where we are, what's going on around us, and how to get to where we want to be. And so you mentioned how to read water, and that was true. So the spokes are, I come in at the hub from a different direction with each book. How to read water.
So what would you say, what direction was this? Was this a first attempt?
Yeah.
Compiling everything that from the past to make it a living art again?
Yeah.
And then How to Read Water was your second book?
No, I wrote a book called The Natural Explorer, which I wanted to call it The New Explorer, but I was still a newbie, and I sort of, in a nice way, I got slightly bullied to say, call it The Natural Explorer, because they wanted it to sound like The Natural Navigator, because that had done well.
Like keywords and...
and it kind of helped, but that was one of the missteps in one sense. I'm really glad I wrote the book. It's about the philosophy of how exploration is not hauling a sled for hundreds of miles across an icy wasteland or a desert, and it's about the very simple concept of making discoveries and sharing them. And that discovery could be there's a rare wildflower, or there's
in my back garden, or in the hill behind my house.
Exactly. So the book is based on the idea, if you make a discovery, it doesn't matter where or how, and you share that somehow, which in the digital age is very easy, you are an explorer. And if you do those two things with integrity and passion, you're more the explorer than the person who goes, I'm going to try and shave 3 hours off this time between points A and B in a hot or cold or wet place. And I realised in that sort of process that I'd missed something. I loved writing it and I learnt a lot, but I missed something, and I didn't realise it at the time, but it was the deductive thing. So the thing that really excites me is in a word, it's signs. You know, and as I keep sort of saying, everything is a sign, but in the early days, the bigger, the bolder, the you know, so the first time, you know, if you live near the coast or you enjoy being on boats or something like that, the very first time you realise you can work out what the tides are doing using the moon, it's a nice big sign. It's, you know, the line, the deduction is nice and easy and powerful and practical. But I'm still learning things about what the moon is telling us now. There's a technique I've been working on for 8 years now that I haven't published because I'm still not happy with it. So the books, so after The Natural Explorer, I wrote The Walker's Guide to Outdoor Clues and Signs, which you held up. Yeah. And my North American publishers gave it a different title, The Lost Art of Reading Nature's Signs. Okay. And it's...
Is that some keyword thing in Britain, or what is Walker more?
Yes, that's it.
Walker's
I'd forgotten, but you've reminded me. Yeah, Walker means something, I think, in the UK that's not quite the same so my understanding from my time in the US and Canada is the middle ground of walking is less I wouldn't say it's less popular, but so
feels more accessible than hiker, trekker. Walker seems more going for a wee wander. So hiking means you've got proper boots on and you're going to go and mix it up a bit. I get it.
And whereas walking it's got a British eccentric sort of flaneury type thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
But, they changed it, and they clearly knew what they were doing, because it's The Lost Art of Reading Nature's Signs has done.
So if someone in North America were searching for that book, and it's called
The Lost Art of Reading Nature's Signs, and it really it's so fascinating, and I'm very fortunate now. I'm at the stage where I can look back and not just think about myself, although we're talking about that, but it's just looking at other people and people at different stages in their journey, of like the moments where your gut's saying something's right, but the world hasn't yet agreed with you. So that book was a complete life-changing moment for me, and I can remember discussing with both, publishers in the UK, the US, and elsewhere, and there was this kind of hesitation. They were saying to me stuff like, I don't know if this works. It's kind of, but if you're doing something genuinely creative, you have to be close to the edge where people are going, I'm not sure this works.
You're not pushing the boundaries far enough, if not.
And it's within hours of it coming out, it just went nuts.
Wow.
It was a complete changer. It gave me the real luxury to kind of think, go entirely with your heart now, because you don't need to worry, for a few years. And then by this point, the deductive thing was well and truly part of me. And I thought, in conversations with lots of people, the water thing had never really been done. And it's a very simple idea, but if you think of a patch of water, anyone watching or listening to this, think of a patch of water that means something to you, that you visit regularly. Scale doesn't matter at all. It can be a pond, an ocean, or anything in between. The puddles even work. If you look at that patch of water, this might be the stream here for you.
I love this stream. I spend many hours by this stream.
And I hope you'd agree with me. You never see exactly the same thing twice.
No.
So even if the water, which it never does, behaves in an identical way from minute to minute, the sun will have moved, the clouds will have changed, the wind will have changed, the animal's behaviour will have changed. So you never ever see the same thing twice. So the book is based on the idea that when you look at a patch of water, and it can be a fountain in a city centre, you will never see that exact pattern ever again in your whole life. We could lead
Can't
10
step
lives.
into the same river twice or whatever.
It is that idea, yeah. But instead of it being purely philosophical, the philosophy is there, but it's come to via a practical way. As in what? So to give you an actual practical example, when the sun sets on the other side of a patch of water, we sometimes get that brilliant, bright ribbon of light. It's known as a glitter path, and the width of that path is telling you how big the waves are, i.e. how rough the water is. So our ancestors, if they were approaching land, would be watching, if it's sunset or sunrise and they're approaching land they don't know, they will be looking at that glitter path because it will tell them where the danger is. If there's a rock or a reef, it breaks the water up, and even if you can't see the rock or the reef, the reflections of the light will tell you. So each book is a collection of that sort of thing, but I do my best to, the thing we were talking about earlier, you're fantastically entertaining in your videos, and I'm trying to not just go fact. Sometimes my publisher says, look, this is a fun story, but you've gone too far off the path. I go, but
it's a
really,
balance, you got to tell through story, but the balance of story.
And so that's what that's what I've been doing, since 2010 full time, is that very, very simple idea, but coming at it, like a maniac from a different direction each time. And my sort of philosophy in writing a book is if somebody needed to go from nothing to a high art form just by looking or experiencing this one niche area, can you give them the book to do that? And it's for others to decide whether I succeed or fail. But that's the aim in each book, is almost taking somebody from zero to guru is the idea. Yeah.
Cool. You remind me of some stuff I've been thinking about. So I've been working on create this online school, which is about using wilderness survival to experience our basic needs at the most fundamental level, and we kind of use it as a foundation to build everything else in life from. It's kind of like so it's kind of mixing mindfulness with philosophy, but practical skills. And the way, I can't remember where I got this term from. It might have been from Alan Watts, which on a drive here we found that we both love good old Alan. But the best way I describe it is a experiential philosophy practice. So it's a philosophy that you have to experience and practice, if that makes sense. So it's like a philosophy is something, it can just be a bit dead, it can just be a bit too much talking, not enough doing. But to actually experience it viscerally, like actually hear it, smell it, taste it, feel it, and that practice it rather than just doing it once. So the way you're talking about this, it's it kind of reminds me of something like that. It's like would you agree? It's experiential
totally.
philosophy practice.
And I really, if I want to completely switch off in a non-natural environment, so like you, I love my my time outdoors and just kind of either focusing or not focusing on nature. But if I want to do a non-natural exciting relaxation exercise, what I love doing is being taken on a fast deep dive into somebody's practical expertise in another area. So to give you an example, if there's something like pasta is everybody I know kind of likes pasta, and it's not the most complex food out there, and yet if there's a cooking program about somebody who spent 30 years just trying to make
from scratch is quite complicated.
Yeah, it is. I've had a go. It's harder than it sounds, but it's in cuisine terms, it's not daunting, is it?
No.
But if if I was to watch a 1 hour documentary about, and I mentioned when we were going for a walk earlier, Hero Dreams of Sushi. You just take a skill. And I like it when it's not something directly related to what I do. Because if it's related to what I do, if it's a nature program or an outdoor skills program or something like that,
switch on your work mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I'm kind of like,
same,
there's a little voice of comparison, kind of like, I wouldn't have done it like that, and or that's a good idea. Or, but if it's
completely
left field,
different.
completely off something like that, I find you can get all of the positives of empathizing with the passion. without having to switch on the workhead. So I do know exactly what you mean. And then we go and try it. So I go, well, I might just actually try and make that pasta sauce. And that's where you go, the brain engages different circuitry. And if you know, and all the bits come together, you do get a really rewarding feeling, don't you?
Yeah. So so you wrote the How to Read Water. So that's your latest book?
No? I wrote a book called in the UK it's called Wild Signs and Star Paths.
Okay.
And in North America it's called The Nature Instinct.
Okay.
We've changed
it's funny
now.
How you change.
I know. I asked them and they kindly agreed to not. But it does show you how fast the world is changing, because I don't think people would do that now.
Yeah, because I live in the world of keywords and stuff and the whole algorithm nonsense on YouTube. But obviously it's just I have to pick one. But anyway, carry on.
Yeah. And that is it's true to the core philosophy of deduction, as in what does that sign mean? But I take it in a slightly unusual direction, which is I use the latest understanding of how our brain works and combine it with lots of research into our ancestors and time talking to indigenous people to understand how it is that we can sense things like our ancestors. By which I mean, I spent a bit of time with the Dayak in Borneo, and they can tell without thinking about it when a person is approaching. And there are very good historical reasons for that. It's less than a century ago, we believe, there was headhunting going on. People creeping into the neighbouring village and lopping somebody's head off. So you kind of need to know that stuff. But there's a difference between having a theory where a deer barking this way means, you know, this, and it barking a different way means that, or a squirrel making a noise, or birds making a noise. They sense it in the way that the best kind of comparison I can give is if you're driving and you see a red light, you don't have to scratch your head and kind of like, oh, I know what that means. It's is that go or stop? You know, it's entered
built
that.
In, yeah.
It's built in, and that's it's a good way of putting it. So that book, Wild Signs and Star Paths, or The Nature Instinct, is about how do we get that sense back? How do we get that fast, deep understanding of what's going on around us? And it was a real challenge to write. I'm really pleased with it, but it was a passion project, and it's now, I think it's one of the books I get the nicest feedback by. It certainly hasn't been one of the most popular ones because it's quite esoteric. It's quite niche.
Yeah. I have something I feel the same with my videos.
Yeah.
Not necessarily all those popular ones get the nicest feedback.
Yeah. So what's your most offbeat, and what's the one where you you look back on it and you go, must have had a strong coffee that day?
I guess the one that comes to mind, I did this video, I told you a bit about it in the car, but flow, the way of the staff and bow to find the flow. And some of the comments were like, well, have you gone a bit mad there? But it was essentially, I guess a bit of a leaf, quite a bit of a tangent away from Highlander survival. But to me, in my mind, it's still all the same. I just can't quite, or it's a lifetime of communicating it, which I guess you might be the same. It's like in your heart, in your mind, in your soul, it's all the same thing. But like language is too much of a clumsy tool to express it. But the way of the staff and bow was. Interested in this phenomenology of flow, this feeling of being in the zone. I was experiencing it, mainly practicing staff martial arts, doing kind of flows, spins, and archery. I could spend like hours and hours of shooting my bow and just trying to hit targets. And I grew up training Aikido, which is a martial art with a deep philosophy about flow. My mum was a Tai Chi teacher, so it was like very much that was kind of in my upbringing in the background, this kind of Eastern philosophy. And I'm obsessed with learning. And I guess I was trying to find 3 principles that get you in that zone and get you in learning. And I was looking at patterns that I was seeing in martial arts. And what I was finding was, or what I based a video on, was discipline, detachment, and play. and how when you balance those three,
What was the third one? Sorry?
play,
Oh yeah.
being in the
Yeah.
zone and play. And when you balance those three and you implement that in your life or learning a new skill, that's how you get in the zone.
Yes.
So it's like the discipline is practicing the things that could potentially be boring, but you know that's, so it might be a movement, it might be doing something with good form and good technique. Detachment is detaching from your frustrations, your imposter syndromes, your chattering mind. It's that kind of meditation, the detaching from the ego, just getting lost in the process. And then play, just enjoying it, you know, taking the piss,
Yes.
making sure that it's, and play I found, especially in practicing martial arts, there's a balance of like, yeah, you still got to be playful, and you've got to have this reciprocalness of, if you have one person just beating the shit out of someone all the time and winning all the time, then that person's like, well, I'm not going to play this anymore.
Right.
But so there's like a right level, and I found this with sparring with people and stuff like that, where it's like you've got to like win a few times, and you know, and there's
Yes.
the science of optimal learning theory. It's like 15% outside your comfort zone, and they've done studies on how what's the percentage of win and failure kind of rates. So it was like a deep dive into that, but it was all told through a story of essentially a character who keeps on falling asleep and waking up and meeting this person, and they have a fight. And first one, he's got nothing and he dies straight away. The second time, he's got discipline, but it's not enough and he dies. Third one, he's got discipline and attachment, and he does a bit better. He gets a few hits in, but he dies. And then the last one, he's got all three and he wins. So it's like, yeah, it was a deep dive using a story, like a
Yes.
martial art, choreographed fight. I had my friend Ben who trained in choreographed fighting.
Okay.
So it was telling a very deep story through that. So that was, a big tangent that I worked so hard on, like, burnt myself out creating that. And then it's just like, release it to the world. You're like, right, deal with that. I don't really know what you're going to make of that. And yeah, it's not my most popular video, but I get people still messaging me being like, whoa, like,
Yes.
you know, I watched that during a period of depression and it just kind of pulled me out of it. And
Cool.
I went and picked up a stick and started
Yeah.
spinning it around, or I started shooting a bow and arrow, or
Yes.
so yeah, you've got to follow those things. Although sometimes you might be like, what was I doing?
Yeah.
It sometimes takes a few years to come back to it. But
Yeah.
enough about me.
Noah.
Yeah, you. So that book about the star signs, that's really interesting, about especially that sense perception and stuff. And again, I feel there's overlap with this sort of. Well, there is if you're talking about tribes people who have a sense of someone sneaking up to them, and the senses you get with martial arts. And yeah, I'm very interested in Japanese philosophy and Japanese
Same.
practice, especially when it comes to certain martial arts and stuff. And yeah, I don't know if you've ever heard of the book Musashi.
No.
No, so have you heard of the Swordsman, Miyamoto Musashi?
Yes.
Yeah, so in the 1920s, Japanese guy wrote a novel based on his life. It's like an epic, and I think the audiobook is like 52 hours long, and I've probably listened to it 20 times. Like,
Wow.
it's just like a background kind of thing I always play. Highly recommend it.
Yeah.
Epic story, but that was a big influence of that video, because it's following his life. It's kind of it's all the characters are kind of learning their things. Anyway, highly recommend that.
Yeah, I'll get amongst it. Yeah.
But yeah, he talks about in the fight scenes, it's all about the sensing and being completely detached. You're just kind of in the zone during his sword fights and stuff. So after that, so is that your latest book? The one?
No.
How many books have you written?
I'm my 9th book is coming out this year.
Okay. 9 books. Huh?
Yeah, and I'm. It's it's such a weird process, because there are moments with each book where I go, that's the last one. I just
Yeah.
you know I don't want to write a book and not throw myself at it. But at the same time, you know, it sounds like you've had very similar experiences. You kind of crawl out the other end and you kind of like go, it's done. You know, I don't want.
And then
to
the publishers are like,
right,
when's the next one then?
Yeah, but also it is within me. It's amazing the resilience. I mean, we've all had probably mental and physical examples of this in our life, where there are moments where you go like, I just can't go through that again, and then you sort of make decisions where you sort of know it puts you similar. You know, I mean, there's a negative aspect of that. You know, there are lots of recurrent patterns that aren't entirely positive. But I think in work, if you're doing something that's really rewarding, but the reward has a price, there is the ability in the brain to kind of shield the cost from you when you're making the commitment decision. Yeah. And I love it. It works for me because it pushes me and I learn but at the same time, being honest, the rebel in me is happy because I am making my own path. I work with publishers and I don't get to do everything I want all the time, obviously, but I can creatively sort of, particularly now, I can sort of say, you know, look guys, this is going to sound, but this is where I'm taking it.
That's very useful to have business-minded folk to work with.
Yeah, and they can hold up a mirror and say very helpful sort of things on a creative level and on a commercial level, because the amount of effort I put in, it's a lovely idea to write the most artistic book ever that's read by 7 people who think it's the best thing they've ever seen, but it's a cul-de-sac, you know. No, I wrote a book called How to Read a Tree, which came out 2 years ago. And that, you know, true to the philosophy, no two trees are the same. Every little difference means something, and we can think of it with different kind of goggles on. You can look at it genetically. You know, we're surrounded by these birch trees here. They're telling us about the soil, the altitude. But then we can look at, so that's the nature. That's the genetic footprint, the genetic plan. But if, you know, just looking at the trees I'm looking at here, none of them are the same. But if I look at the similarities, we've got a lot more branches going out this way. More lights come from there, therefore south is out this way somewhere. And that's the kind of nurture. And then there's time. You know, each landscape, the trees are telling something about what's happened. So in this landscape
storms
here,
and diseases, and human activity and grazing and
and that was a really good fun book to write, and it's a book I would have felt I would have to write one day, because its trees were one of the earliest. So after Sun, Moon and Stars, I think trees were probably the technique I was using seriously early. And in the early days I thought there may be 3 ways of finding a way using trees. In How to Read a Tree, I haven't counted them up, but well over 100 techniques. And my latest, which I'm editing and will be out shortly, maybe about the time that this is out, I don't know, is The Hidden Seasons, a year of nature's clues and signs. So it's same philosophy, but coming at it thinking, so there are certain very interesting patterns that we do well to be primed to look for. The most obvious one being constellations. You know, there's no point looking for Orion in June, but Orion has amazing natural navigation aspects to it. But it's true of all nature. You know, you don't want to go around looking for wildflowers in early January. You'll find some, so it's that. So in that book, I'm exploring why things happen, when they do. You know, why do we see certain flowers and certain animals before others? And some of that, but then that leads into the, you know, I'm effectively, as I try and be in all my books, I'm being a guide. I'm going like, you know, so you can dip into it, but I've written it so that if you start at the beginning and finish at the end, you've been taught a lot of the science, and along the way you say, right, well, in August, we really need to know about these types of storms. You know, these types of storms are rare in winter, but in August, you need to know about these types of storms. And then we explore the science of that and move on.
Cool. So what's the book that's coming out this year?
The Hidden Seasons. I've missed one,
Hidden Seasons.
which I was
You missed
reminded
one.
about by the Storms one. I wrote a book called The Secret World of Weather,
Okay.
where I collected every single example of humans being able to deduce what the weather is about to do just using our senses.
Cool.
And in the process of writing it, this is quite often what I find. I don't know if you find this with your videos, but you have a pretty clear plan in your head, and you take the first step,
Yeah.
and you go, wait a minute. You take the next step, and you go, wait a minute. And in that book, what I suddenly realised is that because I'm always looking at the established science, as well as all of everything from folklore to personal experience to science to indigenous knowledge to ancient knowledge. And in that one, when I was looking at the science, I went, wait a minute. There's this whole wonderful science called meteorology. We've all kind of come across it.
Yeah.
And I did, as I always do, a really deep dive into the current best thinking in that. I read dozens of books and read lots of academic articles and interviewed huge numbers of weather scientists. And in all of that, nobody, not once, did anybody talk about the weather we experience.
Oh.
So meteorology is a science of the weather up there.
Yeah.
You know, at least 100 feet above our heads.
Yeah.
Because that's how you can make a model.
Yeah.
So the wind I saw shaping the clouds and the smoke earlier today is not the wind we're feeling right there. That's an eddy that's coming in because the wind is meeting resistance out there and then curling back in. But that eddy will never appear in a forecast. So if you look at any forecast on the internet or listen to it on the radio or whatever, it's talking about the weather you won't feel. It's the weather well above your head. So I decided in my book, right, I'm going to do every single sign that we can detect, whether it's, the shape of a cloud or the sound an animal's making. But I'm also going to treat weather as something that is something that, we feel on our skin and we live in, rather than something that computers are modelling 100 feet above our head.
You can experience. I mean, you could definitely experience it here in the Highlands. You get the microclimates of the glens.
Yes.
So you look at the weather forecast and it'll be like, oh, it's sunny. It's sunny in that glen, but it's pissing the rain in this one because it's just like whatever it's catching on that mountain or the winds are doing.
And you mentioned earlier that I asked if you spent time here in winter, and you said you tended not to camp here because this spot is particularly cold, and that's the cold air pooling, I imagine. And in this part of the world, the katabatic winds, they're not going to appear. If you've got a very good local forecast, they'll include those. But the weather's the way I put it sometimes. The weather is different on each side of a tree or a building.
Yeah.
So in the book, I even go into the 16 different winds that are born when a wind hits a building.
Wow.
And we can feel 5 of them. Some of them happen above our heads, so we don't see them or feel them.
Wow. Well, I wonder what time we're on. We said we'd go for an hour. It's been an hour. Well, I feel like, we could talk forever. If I had enough memory cards and batteries and whatnot, maybe we could cover so much. But yeah, maybe we could do it again sometime. Obviously, you're up to film a video on how did Highlanders navigate. We're going to dive deep into that. I'm guessing either this will release kind of at the same time or one of or maybe that the Highlander one will release first. So we'll be diving deep into how folks navigated these lands 300 years ago and beyond. Where can people find your books? Where can they find information about you?
Thanks. Yeah, the books are available through all the normal routes. But in terms of, getting a taste for the subject or learning more about me and how I write and teach and stuff, naturalnavigator.com.
Naturalnavigator.com.
Yeah, I've designed the website so you can kind of like have a dip in, and if your interest is weather, you can go that way, or if your interest is animals or plants or stars or whatever, you can go in a different way. And there's a newsletter as well on that, but it's you can get a good taste on naturalnavigator.com.
Cool. Well, I'll put links to your website in the video description. Final question: what way is north?
Hey. Well, it's a really good question. So very, very sort of general sense I'm getting is it's that way.
Yeah.
But it's a really good question in the sense that if I was about to set off on an expedition or even just walking 10 miles properly, I would want to spend a lot of time thinking about what the sun has been doing, possibly marking out shadows, so we can get a perfect north-south line. So the golden rule in natural navigation is it's really, really good at a fast, rough sense, and it's really, really good at a slow, accurate sense. But you can't. So what our ancestors would have done if they needed desperately to know, like, and quite often they were doing that if they were staying in one place a long time. They'd want to set up their homes and everything else with alignment. So they would just do a very simple shadow stick, mark the end of the shadow. When the sun's rising, shadows are getting shorter. When it's setting, shadows are getting longer. So the shortest shadow of the day must be a perfect north-south line.
Yeah.
So.
And I suppose like long-term civilizations and all stone circles and things are even longer alignments, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And certainly the moon, to get the full measure of the moon takes decades, not even a year. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool. Great. Thanks, Tristan.
Yeah.
That was
Cheers.
great. Awesome.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fandabi podcast. In the show notes below, you'll find all the relevant links discussed, as well as links to my website, tomlanghorne.com, my YouTube channels, and social media. Huge thanks to everyone who supports me on Patreon, who make this podcast possible. By supporting on Patreon, you'll also enjoy benefits of early access and have your say on topics and guests I have on the podcast. If you want to take your learning further and join the tribe of like-minded folks reclaiming their primal self-reliance, then check out my survival school, Resilient Roots, where members get access to an ever-growing bank of practical lessons, monthly live calls, and invites to annual wilderness gatherings. So thank you for your valuable attention, and I'll see you in the next episode.